Hi, Mark here from the Tangent-Bound Podcast Network and host of the flagship show, the Tangent-Bound Podcast. Did you know that we over at Tangent-Bound are always looking for amazing podcasts to promote? And did you also know that we are also proud nerds and geeks of everything from movies, music, gaming, TV shows, and comic books to wrestling, MMA, soccer, and football? Whatever you can nerd or geek out about, we've got it. And if you're interested, we can help you find it. And if you're a show looking for a place to call home, we've got you covered. Side effects may include upset stomach, dizziness, tumors, shakes, and in some rare cases, death from excessive laughter. Though to be fair, it's only sometimes. Other side effects may include diarrhea, gallstones, heart palpitations, and strong desire for cookies on the dark side. Talk to your doctor and visit TangentBoundNetwork.com and see if Tangent-Bound Network is right for you.
Sucks to the last drop. Are you gonna blow your head off? Take good aim and don't forget to duck. A life sucks every Monday and all the way to Sunday, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't care how you're doing, what's up or how's it hanging. I'd like to buy this world one last drink. Life sucks all of the time. Stick it up your sunshine, and then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day.
Welcome to the Crazy Life, everyone. If you hear that strange sound in the background, it's my computer threatening to take flight. So, sorry about that.
Yep.
Not sure what's going on with this thing. Anywho, My name is Jen, and I'm your hostess for the day. And with me, as always, we have Brian and Henno. Hey, guys.
Howdy. Hey, Jen.
Hello. So how are you guys doing? What's been going on? Cricket.
Where's that cricket? Where's your cricket?
I know, the one time we need the cricket.
We needed you to open the window right there. Come on, timing.
Thought we were professionals
here.
What
am I doing?
I'll go first, I guess. So, boy, I had therapy this week, which was I didn't get to go to my last therapy visit because, I wasn't feeling real well. And then that was also the day that, we found out about my nephew dying. And, so I haven't been to therapy in like about a month. And man, I'll tell you what, as it got closer and closer within a few days to the, inside a week, I was ready. Like I'm sitting there going, I need to go, have that verbal dump basically. And, it was good. We talked about the situation with my nephew and all that kind of stuff, which was, really good to just talk about and get out and everything, in that environment. And, I also, I've been thinking, cause I heard on, a Tim Ferriss podcast, he was talking about a book that he read. And the whole point of this book is to give you exercises to push you outside of your comfort zone. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, the examples that he gave are way too extreme for somebody like me. I'm nowhere near that point. Cause one of them is basically like go into a coffee shop or some public place that has a good amount of people. Don't say anything to anybody while you're in line or whatever and just lie down for like 10 seconds. Don't tell anyone why. Don't bring any, nothing like that. And then just get back up. And the whole point of it is that you will feel really uncomfortable. But the more you do things like that, you kind of at some point go, this isn't that big a deal. You start gaining perspective on other things and, you can push through your comfort zone more and more. Like I said, I'm nowhere near ready to do that kind of, just the idea of doing it mortifies me, But it got me thinking a little bit about how, I have a lot of thoughts of things that I'm afraid of. Because of anxiety and the voices of depression of, you're no good at this or all the doubt. And I asked my therapist, I was like, I've been thinking about essentially having a journal of things where I write down my fears so that I can look at them and either try to rationalize, or figure out why I'm afraid of this, this, and this, or go, okay, well, here's a checklist of things to work on a little bit, But my big fear was that if I put them on paper that I might obsess on it, and I certainly don't want to do that. I don't want to give power to negative thoughts, And she was very much on board with it, to the point that she was like, if you want to do that and bring it in, we can talk them through. She's like, those would be excellent, talking points for us and stuff. So I was like, okay, so I think I'm going to start doing that. Some of them are super easy, like, driving, and ones that I just jump into my head immediately. But then there's, there's always a lot of them that are kind of those deep down buried ones. And, I was just telling you guys, I listened to a lot of Mental Illness Happy Hour this week, which, if you haven't listened to it, it's a great podcast. Paul Gilmartin, talks with a lot of people about a lot of just whatever it is they're dealing with, whether it's some sort of a mental illness or traumas or these kind of things. And it's a really safe, good environment. He provides a really good place for people to just get their message out to others, or just, have that, to get the stuff out of their head, type of situation. But I forgot where I was going. Dang it. Anyway, but I just, shoot, I really can't think of where I was going. Wow.
Well, I mean, the idea of you writing things down and going over the fears down and going over them with your therapist, I mean, that's amazing. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And you're right, you have to watch that you don't obsess on them.
Yeah.
But that might be something for other people to try as well, just to kind of see them and get perspective on them.
I remember what I was going to say now. He had a woman on there. I can't think of her name now, but he does a lot of times when he had guests on there, toward the end of it, he has a thing where he asks them to bring a short list of things that they fear and a list of things that they love. And they do the fears first and then go to the loves. And the one woman, and it's in the kind of opening or the intro to the podcast now, because she's basically like, I'm afraid that people like me because they think that I'll kill myself if they don't. And I was like, wow, because I've had that thought before. And I know I've talked with other people who have that kind of thought. That's how awful your self-doubt gets sometimes, is that, you really do think sometimes that you don't deserve or whatever. But, that's actually the other place where I kind of got the idea of kind of jotting down the fears and stuff, because a lot of the ones that people bring in there are not like, I'm afraid of ghosts. They're a little different. Like, I'm afraid, to stand up for myself because I'm afraid people will leave me, those kind of fears and stuff. But anyway, so I'm going to start doing that. And then, so that was good. And then while I was in there, I needed to reschedule that telepsychiatry appointment. And they were like, oh, well, we have something on Friday. And I was like, sure, why not? So I went in on Friday for that. So in a rare occurrence, I saw a psychiatrist and a psychologist this week. The psychiatrist, was super nice, asked tons of questions because, he's getting to know me and, try to get a feel for, where I am with anxiety and depression and stuff. And when we were talking, it came up that I don't drive. And as soon as I said, yeah, I don't even drive because I'm afraid of blah, blah. And he goes, perfectly normal. He's like, I hear it all the time. Those words meant so much to me. And I've heard it. I know it already, but it helps so much to hear a professional say that.
Sure.
That he's heard it a ton. And we don't live in like New York or, Chicago where it's common to just public transit everywhere. The area we live in, people drive. There is public transit, but it's not as used as, people just driving around. So, And I told him that, I was like, man, that means so much to me to hear. I'm like, because I've dealt with for so long, there was anytime I told somebody, there's always like a stigma attached to it, like, really? Why not? All you have to do is this, kind of and it's like, you don't get it. I'm not, it's like, I can't explain it to you because you're very comfortable driving. It's hard you can't put them in your head for that moment, But yeah, we went through, some other stuff there, and it wasn't like a therapy thing. He's just asking factual, yes and no kind of things. Maybe explain out a little bit, because he was curious why on the PTSD screener, why I have certain numbers that are a little bit higher, and I explained to him a few of the things I've been through and why they keep haunting me, essentially, and that's where the part of where driving came in. And he was like, oh, okay. He's like, that's normal. He's like, that's totally understandable. And it was just, it's always nice when you go to see any sort of a doctor and they basically, again, they first of all look at you and you can tell they care. And second of all, they're not looking at you like you're crazy, or you're making it up or whatever. You can tell that they're on board with helping, that they believe you to do the work. So, that was pretty cool. But, in the end, he was concerned about my energy levels and my sleeping because I don't sleep regularly and haven't for years and years. And my energy level is always low mainly because I don't sleep well, so I don't get rested. But also because, depression just beats you up. It's an exhausting thing to deal with. So I'm gonna start another medicine to work with my antidepressant to see if it gives me more energy. And we're gonna go from there. He's hoping that that'll help me have some more energy so that I'll do things which will in turn make me tired, which will then help me sleep,
Makes sense.
Yeah. And if not, then we'll address that again. Cause he's like, you're already on medicines for stuff. He's like, I really don't want to put you on more stuff, which again, something I always appreciate. You talk to a doctor and they're not immediately like, oh, here's 15 pills, Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Like, let's see if we can, whatever. But, but I felt really good coming out of there, and I'll see him again in like a month and a half, something like that. So it was good. I had two situations, Wednesday and Friday, where both of them were, I left feeling better than when I went in, which is always awesome, and how you really should feel when you go see somebody,
Right.
So yeah, that's, trying to think if, I've got some other stuff to go over, but I'll go over it like after we're done with our topic tonight. But that was, that's been most of my week, I think. I haven't really done much else, but yeah. So I felt, I've actually had kind of a bit of an optimism about, about where my path a little bit, which is nice to have, because my depression's really been ramping up lately. Like the last month or so, it's been really kind of grabbing control of me a lot more than it was. So it was good to have, those moments. So it's like, okay, even though I'm in this pit, I still had some light shining in, and I noticed it, like I didn't immediately dismiss it as well, I walked out of therapy and like I do most of the time, I walk out of the building and the first thing I do is take in a really deep breath, or do a real good breathing, in and out kind of a thing. And it's just like a big sigh basically. And it's like, you just kind of stand there for a moment and then just feel that I weigh less coming out of there, like I'm gonna live right now for a minute. And then it's like, okay, now I gotta, So, it was good. Yep.
Good. How about you, Hanno? How was your week?
Let's see. Oh, I went to my men's group that I haven't been to in like 2 months.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad you went.
That's good.
So they changed I changed when I take the dogs to grooming, and because we're just sharing the one car. And so that means on Thursdays, when I get off of work, I got to go pick the dogs up and then bring them home. And I have every intention of turning around and going back up to catch them, but the couch has strange properties sometimes.
Yeah.
It does.
The couch has big, strong arms. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Or suction or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. So I haven't gone a whole lot, which, there was quite a bit of understanding along with the, hey, who are you? Like, ha ha, yeah.
All right. Yeah. It's funny is I know exactly what that feels like because for a long time, like various friends of mine, every time I showed up to something, I got that.
Something,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And you're like, whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But it was like, I didn't get to say, we were gonna podcast last Wednesday, and I had a weird day where it was at the end of the day, and it was different than being tired. Like, it was like I hit a freaking wall, and there was this headache, and it was just like, cause I had everything with me to go to the gym, and it was 3:30 or something, hour left of work, and I'm like, I'm doing nothing.
I understand. Yeah.
And, and I was like, and I got home, and when there was a slight little bit of what was the word? If I were to place my finger on the scale of indifference, which was appreciated, but it was really odd, and it's I'm always very wary about days like that because I'm typically not like that.
Right. And see, those are the kind of days when I have a day like that's usually a red flag day to me, that it's like, I gotta make sure tomorrow's not another one. Otherwise, a week from now, I'll be like, I should get out of this bed. Like basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it was wild, but next everything was fine, when it worked out, when I had my meeting, and then over the weekend it was great. I got a ton of music work done.
Yes.
And
awesome.
and it wasn't all easy. There was a lot of hard work, and Friday was kind of a rough morning. I hit a little bit of a wall with some things, and I got a little frustrated, and then I had I had a very difficult conversation with my good friend Andrew, who's out there in Michigan, and he lost another job, and I mean, I know he's still drinking, and I literally got to a point on the phone where I'm like, I can't talk to you anymore.
Yeah. Oh man, that's rough.
And I literally hung up. He was not listening. Like, if somebody wants to drive themselves into whatever bottom they need over and over and over again, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, you're right.
Doesn't make it hurt any less, though, because you want to help, and to see someone that you care about in stress and pain, even if it's self-inflicted, it's still, it hits the heart a bit.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it's a kind of a weird thing because I'm kind of judging what he does.
Yeah, I understand that.
But he called me a couple times during the week at he was texting me at 1 a.m. again. So it's like, okay, you're drunk. Or calling me at work or things where I'm like, my schedule.
Yeah.
It's like, I am happy if you're working within the schedule. So, but I told myself, I'm going to call him on Friday and see how he's doing, because he left me a message. He said something about, being unemployed again. And, we started talking about it, and he's telling me how it happened. And it was like, it's literally the same tape played over and over.
Right.
And, and I'm trying to, I'm presenting my observations, and he's telling me that, my mom said the same thing, that, blah, blah, blah. And then, and I'm just trying to, and there was this, it just got to a point where I'm like, why there's there's no desire to grow on the other side of this phone.
Yeah.
There's no desire to listen. There's no acceptance. There's no humility. There's nothing. It's a brick freaking wall.
And really, generally, and I don't know for sure, but I'm just, generalization is that, I'm gonna sneeze right now. Oops, sorry, I forgot to mute. Is a lot of times when people do those kind of things over and over like that, when they reach out to somebody, really what they want for them is they essentially want them to coddle them, almost like,
it's the truth.
They're there, like, or they want them to go, well, it wasn't your fault. It was this, or this was stupid, or,
or here, let me help you.
Yeah, exactly. And and like you said, realistically, from your side, it's talking to a brick wall. From their side, I don't know why you can't understand me, kind of a...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you reach a point where really you're both talking to a brick wall, essentially.
Yeah. And he gets enough drinks in him, and then that real truth comes out, which is, it's extremely selfish. It's, why haven't you helped me? Why haven't you offered, he throws it out there like, if there's any work out there. And by the time I got done with the phone call, I'm like, no, you need to stay so far away from my world.
Yeah. Well, and the other side of it too is it's like, as much as you love somebody, we've all got friends, like really good friends sometimes, that you would not recommend for a job if they had a gun to your head, basically. Like they're, and like him, if you put your name out there saying, oh yeah, you should hire him, he's got a history of this, and it's like, it's hard to recommend somebody like that, but you don't want to come out and really say that to someone,
but it's the truth.
But it's the truth. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was bittersweet because on one hand, I felt a huge amount of relief, and, he's texted me since then, and I looked down, I haven't even read it. I'm honestly done. I know for a fact that I had to help myself at some point. That's just the way it worked.
Right.
And, and so so between that and having a little bit of frustration with music, I was like, well, I'm going to do my next favorite thing, which is, I'm going to play some video games. And that was horrific. And we're going to touch a little bit on this in our topic tonight, but that wasn't working out. So I got back to music, and, luckily I was in a really bad mood. It was weird. I got surly. Like, I was really surly, and I went, I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat. And I went and had something to eat, and I got back into the house, and I got back to work, and things got better, and I got a lot of work done. And I would take breaks. I'd step away from music for a while, and, I'd play some video games again. And it got worse and worse and worse until I finally deleted the freaking app on Saturday night. And I'm like, I am done.
Yeah.
Because it's becoming an addiction.
Right.
In one that it's affecting my mood. And anyhow, we will touch on that.
And really, though, it's like, why would you want to play a game that just makes you angry, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just because I know why it was happening.
Yeah.
But it still was like, I felt it was me, and I was doing it on purpose. I was holding a mirror up is what I was doing.
Right, right.
And I didn't like what I saw.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay. So I put messages up I put a message up to my, clan mates. I said, I'm ready to rage quit. So if you don't hear from me, I did, and I left the clan.
Yeah.
And I'm part of an amazing Facebook group. It's a bunch of Brits, and they're so cool. But it's like, if I'm going to step away from something, I can't see a feed. So I left the group. I left them a message too. I'm like, I'm just pissed.
Well, you can always, I'm sure they'd let you back in at some
they
point.
will for sure. Yeah.
So it's,
I'll see you guys in 6 months.
Right.
I mean, that's the truth. Yeah. It was kind of wild. And, but it's just a reminder about my personality and things about me and my own red flags, I guess.
Yeah.
So I feel really good though because I'm still motivated to do some work, and if I'm in any hour that I'm not playing a video game, I can be sitting there making some music. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it's been, I'm really stoked. There's a bunch of wins in there.
One of the podcasts I was listening to this week talked about that a little bit, about how I forgot who it was. This guy was talking about how he gave up video games because he's like, as much as I enjoyed playing them, he's like, what I realized is that he's like, in my head, I'm going, I'm not doing enough of this, or I'm writing, or I'm not doing enough of what he's like. And then it's like, you know what? I sit in front of my Xbox for 3 hours a night. Well, there's plenty of time to write then, he's like, I know I didn't have to give it up completely. I could have, cut down to, hey, you get an hour of Xbox time, and maybe you don't get any Xbox time unless you do an hour of writing, or, he's like, I could bargain with myself. He's like, but I know myself well enough to know that I'm just better off just put the video games aside. He's like, get into the writing so that becomes the habit, and then if I have time, play video games. He's like, to me, it was reorganizing my priorities,
Yep.
And, he's
That's
like,
exactly it.
Yeah, he's like, I realize that I enjoy, when I'm done writing, he's like, I enjoy that process and stuff. He's like, but I have to force myself to do this. Otherwise I'm going to make excuses. And he's like, it's so much easier to just power the Xbox on, than to sit down and do the work. And I was like, that makes a ton of sense, cause I know a lot of people that would probably be the same way, essentially, that like, oh, I don't have time for anything. And you're like, dude, you're on your Xbox all day, or you're on your phone for 17 hours. It's like, set it aside for, a solid hour or whatever. So yeah, again, we'll get into more of this. Henno, I have a quick question for you, going back to your men's group thing. Since you haven't been there in a while, and then you went, did you have a similar feeling like I did with therapy, that it was kind of something missing, or did you just kind of slide back in and whatever?
Yeah, I do slide back in. I noticed, when I shared in the meeting that I needed the release, because I went on for quite a while.
Yeah.
But it was all about good things. It was things I was grateful for, and it was a lot of gratitude. And at the end I said, well, I obviously needed to let some stuff out. It was the cathartic part of it.
Sure.
And I went outside and, I decided not to go out to dinner with everybody. I just went home. And it felt good. And so then it got me back into my head. It immediately puts me in the right space where it's like, okay, yeah, well, what other one can I go to? Where else can I tap in? That kind of a thing. So yeah, it does that. It's, the thing for me is not so much about what I get. Is there was a guy that, shared something at I was amazed. It's hard to get new people to say something, and you always don't necessarily want to hear what they have to say. I don't mean that mean, but it's just kind of the truth.
Yeah.
And my buddy Whitey threw it out there and said, hey, do one of you two guys have something to say? And the guy shared about having this spiritual epiphany, and he had a complete breakdown and burst into tears. And it was the most amazing thing I ever heard. I just said, thank you. It sent chills throughout me, because
that's huge. I mean, on your, an early visit to stand up and to be honest like that. I mean, that's really, to admit to that level of vulnerability, that's it. That's a huge move. Yeah.
And he even said, he's like, I stopped drinking 3 weeks ago, but I'm making 2 days ago my sobriety date, because I finally surrendered. And I was just like, oh,
wow.
And then strong. It was this whole idea again, like, you mentioned last week. It's like, okay, and these are men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a group of men sitting there talking about their feelings.
Right, yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
How unbelievably incredible is that?
That's awesome. Yeah.
That is awesome.
So, yeah. It was worth it was worth all of it.
Yeah.
Just to hear that, whatever it was, 2 or 3 minutes.
It's funny because that's kind of what I get out of listening to like Mental Illness Happy Hour or Wrestling with Depression, those kind of podcasts, or even to some extent like Risk or The Moth, in that you'll hear someone's story. And I'm very much the type that when I hear those stories, they affect me. Like I feel for the like I'm very empathetic like that. But that's what it is a lot of times, is then you hear those stories and it's just like, you can hear sometimes when people, you know, when they tell you about how they had their epiphany, or they were like, you know, all this happened, but then, and they talk about some change they made, and you're just like, you're rooting for them, you know, you're like, and so I totally get it. It's like, without doing the group dynamic from listening to those podcasts, like, nothing makes me happier than when you listen to someone, they tell like an hour of really, or 20 minutes, whatever it is, of rough stuff, and then they're like, but then this happened, and all of a sudden, and then you're like, you know, cause you always want the happy ending, you know, you want people to, you know, to not suffer anymore. And sometimes that isn't the case. You know, some of these stories I've heard, there's sometimes the people are like, I'm still in a really bad place, and blah, 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 or, you know, so, it's great. And like we said, I don't mean it to sound sexist at all, but I'm extra happy that guys are doing that, because guys tend to not do that. You know, we're conditioned a lot of times to hold it in and be strong and stoic and all this.
Hey, suck it up, buttercup.
Suck it up.
You know, the only emotions you're allowed is anger and stoked.
Yep. And you only cry at like Old Yeller or
Where the Red Fern Grows.
Yeah.
Which is on Amazon right now, and I'm avoiding it like the plague. It's sitting there right there, and I'm like, I know what you're going to do to me. It's just like 8 Below.
Right.
I'm going to sit here and just blubber.
Right.
How about you, Jen?
Well, it's been an interesting week. Work has been kind of crazy. Went through a few different
kind of crazy.
situations.
You put in like 90 hours this week.
Right. So, this week I clocked in a total of 62 hours. And,
not bad.
so that's been my life. I've been working.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting. It's been kind of a real test for me, because as I'm working, I'm also training. And I'm training someone that, you know, she needs a little bit more confidence, but, you know, she is new to the role. So, you know, that comes with the territory. It makes sense. So it's been interesting, because I've really been working on my patience, as well as my understanding and my empathy. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my skills that I've been working on really were showing their true colors. It's like showing how much work I've done and showing where I'm at with things. And, you know, there's some room to grow, of course. There always is. Mm-hmm. So the places I would like to get better. But it's really been a good test for me, shall we say, to really see where I'm at with these things that I find I hold in very high esteem, and what I want to be and who I want to be. So it's been really cool to kind of see that happening.
Yeah.
You know, it stinks, because I don't really have time to kind of, again, some stuff we're going to touch on today in our article. But the house has not been up to. I have pretty low standards, but the house didn't even meet my low standard.
Well, you know what? I mean, but at the same time, I mean, it's not like you've got an excuse, you know, for lack of a better,
right.
You've got a good reason for, you know, because obviously some of that time that you may have spent cleaning is now being spent at work. So, you know, there is an element of that.
Exactly.
And really, and you shouldn't cut back on you time. You know, like the time you need to relax and recharge for all those, you know, hours at work. So, you know.
Yeah, so and then that's what I told myself. I caught up on some stuff today and stuff, which was good. I caught up on sleep. And, you know, another lesson that we talk about on here, you know, making sure that you recharge your batteries so you have a full cup to be able to give to others. So before you give to others, you know. So I've been really trying to make sure that I'm getting plenty of sleep, that I'm getting plenty of downtime, you know, personal quiet time. You know, it stinks, because my husband is working, you know, he works nights while I work days. So when I work late hours, I don't get a chance to see him. So where I would have kind of someone I could bounce ideas off of and bounce things off of, he's not been there. So that's been another thing that I've been working through this week is like, okay, really breaking things down and trying to really think about things and make sure I keep my perspective on stuff.
Right.
People are going to pull my perspective, try to pull me in different directions, but I need to make sure that I keep my perspective and my picture in front of me of what I want to see and who I want to be, and not let others kind of push me one way or another. Especially when you get tired. When you get tired and you get frustrated, it's very easy to give in to that type of stuff and just kind of go along with things. And no, I need to be me. I need to be an individual, and I need to speak for myself and not feel, and not have to lead the charge or whatever. I don't have to be the one in charge all the time, especially when it's not a given job. Yeah. It is not my title.
Yeah.
I have to make sure that I am trusting in others and letting others take lead and follow when I want to follow and stand up when I feel I need to. So
that's a big deal, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. That's not. There's funny. You brought up things that I literally shared about at my meeting last Thursday, and the idea of opportunities to practice compassion and patience with people.
Mm-hmm.
To like, how good does it feel afterwards? How good does it feel when you go home at the end of the day that you didn't get flustered by someone, frustrated, or even just roll your eyes once, or sigh, that you just sat there and you were patient. I mean, that feels so good. And the other one is when you can let go of needing to lead or be in charge when you don't have to.
That's a
huge just
control.
Relief to that.
That's a control thing, most people who have a need to grasp to control are the types to do that. Because I used to do the same thing, that it's like at some point you're like, well, it needs to be done. I'm just going to do it, or I'll do it. Get out of my way, kind of a mentality. And when you start trusting others, you're letting go of that need for control, which is we've all talked about on here is a very freeing feeling.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
We
Yeah.
got some serious wins in there.
Yes. Yep. And I'm really happy with the way things went. There's things I could have done better, but that's okay. And I'm happy that I can see places I want to improve, but I can also appreciate and give myself the kudos that I deserve for the places that I did well. So I'm really, I'm trying to focus in perspective is just kind of been my mantra this week. Just focus in perspective, keep things in perspective, and try to steer the course that you want to steer.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting, but yeah, it's been a good week, and you guys get to hear about it probably for the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks. I'll be on the same schedule. So.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so it's going to be a long haul.
Yeah.
You know what it sounds like, Jen, though? It sounds like you're making a daily commitment to not only your own well-being as far as your attitude goes, but everyone around you.
Yeah, I'm trying.
And that's not easy when you're pushing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when we usually let go of that. We're just like, you actually, I know when I'm busting my, tuchus, I'm putting in the, going those extra miles and, all that stuff, I can get a sense of entitlement in the way of my attitude.
Yeah.
That, oh, well, if you were doing what I am doing, you'd have an attitude also, a negative attitude, or I should be able to get away with a little grumpy, whatever, or, however it is this feeling of like, oh, I've earned to not care in a way.
Yeah.
And I hear you trying not to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it makes sense too when you're working that many hours, the more angry you are, the more resentful, the more controlling, all these things are battery drains, so you're already, even if you went in and had the best attitude for 60 hours, by the end of that week, you're exhausted because you've pushed past comfort zone by quite a bit. So then if you have all those extra battery drains on there, you're going to be, so frazzled by the end of it. Again, right into our topic tonight.
Yeah. And you're also going to just be a walking distorted thinking list.
Yep. You really are. Yeah.
Well, I told because there's me and another person, another woman, are the two main people right now on the team, but we work opposite shifts. And I told her, I said, this is going to be a really a big test on both of us to trust each other and to trust ourselves. Trust ourselves to do the best job that we can do and not beat ourselves up if we can't get it all done. And then trust the same in the other person.
Right.
Because if you're not there and there's a lot of work that gets left, it is very easy and very natural to instantly go, what were they doing? Yeah. And being judgmental and getting very, very snarky and sassy, with the other person.
Yeah.
And it's based on trust. I have to go in believing that regardless of what my initial feelings are, I have to convince myself and believe in that they're doing the absolute best they can. And if they couldn't get to something, that's a good reason why. I may not know it. I may not never know it, but I have to trust and believe in that. Because if I don't, if that breaks down, we're screwed.
Yeah.
We will never get through this.
It's one of those times where the trite saying from corporate of don't worry about them, just worry about you, really is the best advice, because if you go in and just do what you can do, and just like you said, you're essentially just trust that they're also going to do what they can do, and then at the end of the week or whatever, it's like, well, we still have more to do or whatever, but if you've done all you can do, that's it. That's really all there is. You can't worry about what others are doing, because you're not going to make them do any more work. And if you say something, they're going to resent you. Then there's animosity between you, and you never, then communication breaks down, which could be a huge problem, and it's just in the end, it's really not worth it to be right. Going back to, was that last week or the week before, where we talked about, it's like, even if you're right, even if you look over and you see them playing on their phone and they should be working instead, it's like, is saying something really going to make it better?
And you summed up why my buddy keeps losing jobs.
Yeah. There you go.
In a nutshell, he needs a little Jen in his life right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. I'll tell you, it's your initial instinct is to go, what were they thinking? Yeah. What were they doing?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. It's like, why wouldn't have they done it this way? That's dumb. That, especially when you're tired, especially when you're working like so many hours, it is right there.
Yeah. Well, especially
for you to go there.
Especially when you're working that many hours or whatever, because you're going, I'm pushing myself to exhaustion, and you look over and, like I said, you see him playing Candy Crush or something, or on Twitter or whatever, or I'm just using that as a random example, but whatever it is, even if they just don't seem to be working as fast as you, and you're just like, and maybe they, like you said, you just trust that whatever pace they're going at is what they need to do. Maybe they have a situation where if they push themselves more, they go into a panic attack, or they, who knows? And
or they make more mistakes, or whatever it is. They need to do them, and I need to do me.
Exactly.
And that's where it comes down to it. And I always ask myself, I'm like, if you get called on the carpet in front of the company president, and they ask you why you made that decision, if I can say that was the best decision that I knew how to make at the time and stand behind that, then that's the best work I can do.
Really, it is, yeah.
If I don't feel I can stand behind it, if I'm called out on it, then I can't do it that way. I have to do it my way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So. Well, with that, I think it's time for us to kind of jump into our article today is on overstimulation. And we kind of already, it was neat because we kind of already touched on it a few times in our intro here.
Yep.
And let me get going. All right. Taming a modern problem that leads to anxiety. So a lot of times what we don't think about is the effect of all of the stuff that's happening around us. The electronic devices, all the TV, all of the noise, all of the, activities that we do and how busy we keep ourselves. We never really stop and think about all the different things that we do and how they could be contributing to mental imbalance, shall we say. In this particular case, they talk about how it contributes to anxiety. Mm-hmm. So no one, including mental health experts, know for sure what causes anxiety. It's thought to develop from a combination of factors, including genes, ongoing stress, and traumatic life events. According to psychologytoday.com, there's a growing body of evidence that overstimulation can be a major contributing factor to anxiety, especially for those who are particularly sensitive to external stimuli. So, for few people would argue that modern life provides a nearly overwhelming amount of sensory bombardment in the form of noise, crowds, traffic, clutter, and the demands of ever-present electronic devices. So today we're going to take a look at how overstimulation can trigger stress and anxiety and steps you can take to tame the assault on your senses. Woo! Mm-hmm. All right. It's kind of interesting because we the three of us live in slightly different areas. I'm more out in the country. I know, Brian, you're a little bit more in, not in the city, but more in the city type of an atmosphere. Mm. And Hanno, where are you at? Are you more country or are you more city?
You know what? I'm kind of in between.
Okay.
I'm nowhere near a city, but it's still a resort, so there's certain times a year where this place is a madhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Right.
So it's interesting because the first one they talk about is noise pollution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't get much out here. Like the noise pollution will occasionally, I might hear a car going down the street or, maybe when my neighbors is playing their music a little loud.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that's the extent of what I deal with.
Noise pollution isn't just like at home though, it's like throughout your whole day. Because you think about it, it's like everything around you just about, there's rarely times that I can think of now to where there's just quiet. Like everything, it's so easy to have streaming music or podcasts or TVs on kind of everywhere you go. You don't just sit anywhere quietly anymore, really. Like now people have their phones everywhere, so there's that constant, you can have noise in your head all the time, basically. Like on a train, some people used to read on the train. A lot of people still do, but a lot now watch TV shows on their phone, or whatever. So it's not as much of a, and not that trains or buses or whatever are necessarily quiet, but you get my point. It's like, It's so easy. And like this mentions, vehicle traffic, television, leaf blowers, music, smartphones, and it makes sense because everywhere you are, like even, I was at a thing for Social Security, I don't know, a year or two ago, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, which was fairly quiet. There was no music. The only thing you really heard was, like, you heard, like, the hum of the lights and, that kind of stuff. But then a woman sat down, and she still had her keyboard sounds on her phone. Mm-hmm. So you keep hearing this click, 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 and I'm sitting there, and, I mean, you could just feel the rage rising in me, because it's just like, it's like, turn it off. Like, this is annoying. And it's like, to me, it's weird because it's one of those things you can easily turn off. And why would you want to hear that? That's noise pollution you can easily filter out. And there's no reason. Like, I don't even know why they have those on the keyboards anymore. Like, they should just eliminate that. Most people turn them off. It's rare that you hear that. Most people have it completely shut off because it's super annoying, But that, like that kind of a thing. And so there's kind of that opposite too, to where and now again, I'll touch on this a little bit. I want to talk about this in a future episode probably, but I listened to that Mental Illness Happy Hour, and one of the episodes was on misphonia, which is basically to where you go into a rage feeling over certain sounds, like people eating or whatever. And I certainly, absolutely, I've never been diagnosed with it, but anyone who knows me, if you read the description, you'll go, oh yeah, that's Brian. So, like I said, I'm sitting there and just that noise, it's like, that's the only noise. It's like, when you sit in a real quiet room and you hear a clock, and then all you can hear is the clock, and you're like, after a while, you want to rip the clock off the wall. It's that kind of a concept that even when things are quiet and then there's like that one noise, even though it's on its own, it's really not overwhelming, but it becomes overwhelming because it's the only noise, So I think there's kind of that end of it too. Or like you walk through like some businesses and all you hear is clacking of keyboards, like there's no music or anything else. Yes. You just hear click, 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 and as you're walking through. It's not as bad now because the keyboards are more quiet, but stuff like that, I think it adds to it. And I don't think people really, a lot of times don't consider those little noises too, that add to all of that. So,
yeah.
Well, one of the things that I notice is all summer long, there's a leaf blower somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm next to a golf course.
Oh,
so
geez.
There's always something.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And either on that property, the neighboring property, my own property, maybe it's me, I've got the thing in there. But the fact of the matter is you will always hear a leaf blower in the summer.
Yeah.
And then after the fall, after all the leaves have been picked up, all of a sudden there's no lawnmowers.
Yeah.
There's no leaf blowers. It's an odd sensation.
Right. And it's too early. Quiet. I was saying it's too early for like snow blowers. So yeah.
And that's, yep. And then what we have up here, which is interesting, is the snow guns when they start making snow.
Oh, right.
And they're loud.
I bet.
And then now you've got another. And these are all things that have roughly a white noise kind of a, sensation to it in the background.
Yep.
These are things that our brains are trained to eventually block this out.
Yeah.
So when I walk into a room and there's the air conditioning is running up in the ceiling, and let's say I'm walking into a doctor's appointment and there's somebody flipping a magazine. Mm-hmm. By the time I walk up to the counter, my brain, if it is functioning properly, has disregarded the fan, disregarded the flipping pages, and I am able to focus on the task at hand, which is having a conversation with the person on the other side of the counter. Now, here's an interesting thing to think about that I read in a book. Somebody with autism does not have that filter.
Yeah, you know what? I don't have that filter.
And some people don't either.
Yeah. Because I'd hear the person flipping the pages, and for a while it wouldn't bother me probably. But like it's at a certain point, it probably would be like, I just want to look at him and be like, enough, and that's what that misphonia is. Again, I'll get in a minute.
Yep.
But
and everybody else in the room is like, what is your issue? Because they, right? Yeah. So think of a person with autism that walks into a room and it's being assaulted by all the sounds at once.
Absolutely.
They cannot disregard the hum of the computer monitor, all the little sounds that are happening all at once. They are unable to do it.
Yeah.
And when we are not in a good place, whether it's because of anxiety, we have a hangover, we didn't get enough sleep, our brain is unable to do that filtering.
Yeah.
And that's why, and we have so much of this sound, and that's the one thing that this article really talked about is take the time to be quiet.
Yeah.
We, human beings, everyone likes to think, oh, well, you think we would have adapted to this by now, like screens. It takes thousands and thousands of years for human beings to evolve.
Yeah. Technology is much faster than evolution is as far as human evolution. Much faster.
Our brains are not going to adapt to computer screens, sound, but all the stuff that we've just added in the last 20 years, our brains will not catch up to and will not adapt to. We will not change for thousands of years. Right. So what we throw ourselves into an artificially,
a great example,
out of place situation.
A great example is this: if evolution was quicker, nobody would really get sunburns.
But it's these things and the same thing goes with, and I learned a lot of this talking about food and sugar and blah, blah, blah. It's like we have changed the food of our existence. Our bodies cannot adjust to it. Yeah. It doesn't matter that it's been 50 years or 100 years or 500 years. We are doing something that it's going to take us thousands of years to change to make it work. So in the meantime, we poison ourselves every day. Yeah. And the same thing goes with our environments.
Right.
And so noise pollution can be, it could really be like you've talked about, Brian. It could be that switch. It could be the straw for that particular day.
Yeah. And honestly, like I said, me with this other, it's a little different, but it is for me a lot. I'm not, I was out to eat before we recorded, and there was a kid at the table next to me who was eating nachos, and the kid would not shut his mouth. And the whole time, all I can hear, and I was at a Golden Corral. There were a lot of people in there. There's a lot of noise, right? All I could hear was that kid crunching those chips, and I just wanted to punch him. I mean, and Jen's been around it plenty. She's seen it. It's just, it drives me absolutely insane to hear people eat. Certain foods are way worse than others. Most of the time it's just when people won't close their mouths that it's the worst. And that's what the kid was doing, was he didn't close his mouth, and I keep hearing the crunching. And it's almost like every crunch just gets louder and louder and louder, So, and I try really hard not to be an ass about it, but it's so hard for me to do, because it'd be like if somebody just walks up to you and just keeps poking you, and at some point you turn around and you yell, "Stop it." And that's what I want to do. So it's not even like on that mental illness happy hour they were talking about, it's not even a situation to where you can't go through, you can't really medicate it. There's not a lot, all you can do is practice rage control on it, because that's really what it is. It puts me into a rage almost. And, and I've tried different stuff. Like, I got a brother who is an obnoxious eater. And when I was over at his house and we were going to eat, I put in earbuds and I blasted music basically to try to cancel that sound out. Or I always will have a TV on when people are eating, or, anything to create more noise. And, it helps, but not enough. So, and it stinks, because one situation like that can, as horrible as this sounds, it can almost ruin a good chunk of my day.
Yeah, the experience.
Sure. Or put me on edge for the rest of the day, kind of a thing. No matter how I work against it. And it's not just people who have like this misophonia or misophonia. I forgot what it is. It might be misophonia. I might be mispronouncing it. But they, but just anybody, it's like
anybody,
if you just constantly have stimuli, noise just around you all the time, it's like at some point your brain really wants a balance, and like it mentions here, it says as little as 2 minutes of silence reduces heart rate, breathing rate, and blood pressure, and it says that just being in quiet, works better, for relaxing you than even listening to relaxing music, which makes sense. Cause again, music, you're engaging it. It's I'm fine in quiet. I can sit and just have no noise around me and be okay. I know a lot of people can't. After a while, the silence becomes, loud,
Yeah, deafening as they call it.
Sure. Yeah. I can understand that. Like somebody like me, the only issue I have with quiet is a lot of times when there's absolute quiet, my brain goes, hey, I have an idea. How about you hate yourself? So,
What are you doing over there?
yeah. You weren't going to do something, were you? Yeah.
That's really what I think the whole point of that article is that we, you know, just being a normal human, this could get to you.
Yeah.
And if you don't take care of yourself, you could become abnormal, because a lot of these things, if you could have a traumatic event and now you've got some sort of a PTSD type of a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that this can create anxiety. So why put yourself in a situation where you can make yourself anxious when just getting some quiet can help you?
Right. You know,
Very true.
and it does mention here that if you don't have like a quiet place or whatever you can go to, get like earplugs or noise canceling headphones or earbuds, which certainly help. You know, they can help quite a bit. There's been times where I did it actually when I was in school this last time, because I have issues concentrating. So in order to read, I have to have like absolute quiet, because if I start hearing other things, I'll start focusing on them instead of reading. So I put on my noise canceling headphones and turn them on so that I'd read, and all I heard was that, you know, that kind of light static that they create. You know, but that helps. There were times where I would just put those on just to kind of block out other noise too. So, you know, that's a really good tip.
Absolutely. Well, the next one talks about clutter. So if you feel overwhelmed by clutter, you can attest to the fact that it causes stress. A poll conducted by About.com found that 1/3 of their readers avoid going home because their house is so messy that it causes them stress.
Wow.
UCLA explored the relationship between clutter, families, and stress, and found that women especially are stressed by clutter. The amount of stress they experience at home is directly proportional to the amount of stuff their family has accumulated. So, simply put, less stuff equals less stress.
And I'll tell you what, I am the giver of this stress to my partner.
Boy, I'm glad I'm not that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is something this is a real deal. And Sharon comes home, and the first thing she gets hit with in the front room is my clutter.
Yeah.
And if she's already had a stressful day, it can literally throw her through the roof, because it's like, and there's a reason she beelines for her bedroom.
Yeah. It's a safe
I
space.
totally understand it.
Yep.
It is, because the clutter is not there. It's in my world, and you know, I try to work on it. I try to get a little better, but it's part of who I am.
Yep, I'm the same way.
And I need to be a better cohabitant.
I'm terrible
in
at
that
it.
regard, because some people, if a lot of this can just be upbringing. It could be so many different factors. It could be something in your life, or it could be, you know, something that you do have a mental illness, and it manifests itself in this way.
It could also be just a prioritization situation too.
Yeah.
In that you're like, you know, that it's like, this is not as important to me as doing this, so whatever. And then eventually, or then, you know, it's like somebody like me, it gets to a point that it's awful, and I'm like, this is going to take forever to clean up. Meh. You know?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. I don't know how it's affecting me. Right?
True. Yeah,
so
right.
I know it affects her.
Yeah.
And I know it does affect me, but it affects me in weird places. Like, for the most part. So I can disregard clutter like I disregard noise in a room.
Yeah.
But there's always a time and place where all of a sudden I look around and I see all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I lose it.
Yep. Yep.
And I get frustrated, and I get anxious, and I get, you know, it throws me off. And it's a simple fact. When I deal with clutter in more than just, you know, if I deal with clutter in my brain and in my physical environment,
Yeah.
I'm happier.
Right.
Yeah.
I am less stressed. Things feel good.
I just read something yesterday that actually was talking about clutter, and it said something about, that people who disregard clutter are, in whatever study was done or whatever, are like 37% more efficient. And it's like, well, it makes sense. They just don't spend their time cleaning the clutter. They do instead of clean, you know, but the people who don't clean, or do clean, I'll bet are probably closer to an actual better balance of a person, you know. The people who clutter may be great at getting stuff done, but it's like, you know, it's kind of like a hurricane. It's like you need houses knocked down. It does a great job, but it also doesn't care what it tears up in the process, you know. And, you know, some people are that way. They're like, oh, I got everything done. And you're like, yeah, but this place is a mess. You know, it's going to take us 3 days to clean up after you. And it's like, well, yeah, but it got done, you know. So, you know, there could be a little of that in there too. But, you know, and I also know, like, you know, there's all sorts of things that, you know, like creative people tend to be more clutter based. You know, they don't tend to be as clean about everything. And, you know, it's funny. I've seen so many artists, where they post, you know, studio pictures, and they're either one of two things. One, immaculately clean. And generally when they're that, I'm like, I bet they cleaned before they took the pictures, you know? And the other is you just stuff everywhere. And it's a lot of it's because it's like, well, I'm working on this, and I don't want this too far out of hand because it's reference or that, you know, and that's what it ends up being a lot of times, is that they know how their mess is organized, but it's still, to the average person, they just walk in and go, how can you find anything in there? You know, and it's like,
sum me up.
Yeah, and it's like, because I put it there, that's how I can find it. If I had someone else try to find stuff, it'd take them all day, you know. But with me, I can be like, oh yeah, I know this is over here, and just go through this big stack and be like, yeah, here it is, you know.
Exactly.
But in the end, it really is overwhelming. Like, I look at the stuff I have just to the left of me on my desk here, and I've just got papers and stuff stacked, and every time I look at it, I'm like, I gotta clean it, and it bugs me. And it's, you know, like on my to-do list, there's always clean desk is always on there. Like, I never cross it off, because even if I do it, I know I'm gonna need to do it again, so I never cross it off. You know,
right.
So.
It's an ongoing gift.
Yeah, exactly.
I hear you.
I just took a picture of mine.
Oh, nice.
I'll post it on Twitter along with the episode when it comes out.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, this
got clutter.
This recommends you know, decluttering one small area at a time, which, and really anything, to-do list, cleaning, those kind of things, they probably work better if you approach them this way. You know, because then you don't feel as overwhelmed, like, oh my god, my whole house is a mess, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know what? It was like, when I worked at the video store, one of them, they had a certain section of the store every day had to be cleaned. So that across a month, basically, you'd completely have cleaned the whole store at least once. And, you know, but it wasn't overwhelming. You weren't like, man, we gotta spend all day cleaning this place. It's like, it'll take an hour, you know, and you're done. And then the next day it's the same thing. So, and it worked really well, you know?
Yeah. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And that's kind of where I try to do, you know, I try to clean as I go when I can, and I try to do one little spot at a time when I can. And eventually, you know, at the end of the week, I'll have to take a chunk of time, you know, a few hours, and just kind of do a bigger clean.
Yeah.
Per se.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, everybody has their comfort level of where clutter is, but it does help. It does help keep, you know, mentally, to kind of keep you on a cleaner path, you know. It helps to declutter your mind and keep your mind clear. So
yeah, definitely.
Huge help. Let me see here. And then the next one is, if the thing will catch up on us.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, scroll bar.
The next one's multitasking.
Thank you.
Yeah. I had already scrolled down to it, so.
This one is kind of weird.
It is.
Because it's like the hot button issue of the, I hear this, I think I hear this a little too much nowadays. And then maybe just because there's a lot of studies being done on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's physically impossible to do two tasks at once.
Right.
So you have to what ends up happening is you do one task for a minute and then another task for a minute, then back to the first task, then back to the second task.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to actually be doing two things at once because your brain cannot physically do that.
Right.
So the idea of multitasking is basically being inefficient.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be very efficient because you're doing one thing and another thing and you get two things done at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't work out that way usually.
Yeah, and the reason I think people think it's efficient is because, like, at the end of, say, an hour, you're like, oh, I got two things done in the hour. But you don't realize that each thing would have taken you, 30 minutes or maybe 20 minutes if you just focused on the one and then,
Exactly.
But yeah,
and that's a very subjective thing.
Yep.
Because you're generally not, you don't necessarily have a controlled environment where you can say, oh, well, I did this, I did two things at once. It's like, yeah, but did you do those things efficiently? Well, of course I did. Yeah, well, all right. Have you done that one thing by itself in the last 2 days without the other,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so subjective,
Yep.
And I know for a fact, like, I do two things at once all the time. And I guarantee one of them I listen to podcasts all day.
Yeah.
Sometimes after the hour, I don't know what I listen to.
Exactly.
Because
Yep.
I'm at work.
Yep.
It was just words in my ear, unless I laughed.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I can't listen to, like, music anymore when I read, because my brain starts getting caught up in the lyrics of the music, and my brain will start singing along instead of reading and taking in, what I'm supposed to, or it'll do a little of both, but then at the end, it's like, it's not efficient because I've done both terribly. Or like you said, or at that point, really listening to music isn't, can't be gauged as terrible so much, but it's like the reading definitely would be, to where I'm like, I gotta go reread that because I don't remember what I read, And if you're reading for fun, it's less important, but like when I was doing it for school, it's like, I need to retain this, So
yeah, I'll even try to like read a magazine or read like the newspaper online or something while I have a podcast going.
Yeah,
I got to turn that off. I can do it with music.
Yeah,
I mean, I can definitely do it with music, but I can't do it with
even like comic books. I can't do it. And don't get me wrong, I read a decent amount of comic books that aren't like just capes and tights. Like I read some that are a little more deep than that. And, those ones, you want to make sure you're catching the story and everything. But it's still, no matter how light I could be reading, I don't know, a Powerpuff Girls comic book, and I would still not retain half of it,
Yeah.
Unless I just read the book.
So whenever possible, my recommendation is try to minimize the multitasking. I do it all the time. I multitask all the time, more than I should, especially when it comes to work. So it's kind of clutter on your brain,
Well, and another point of this is there's times where I'm trying to do 2 or 3 things at one time, essentially, and I'll end up getting none of it done because I'll reach a point to where I get too stressed, and you don't think about the fact that, maybe if you would have just done one thing,
Yeah.
that maybe you wouldn't have had that, because now, it's like, look, I can throw one ball in the air and catch it. No problem. Two becomes a little bit of a challenge. 3 becomes more, like eventually you get to a point where you can't, you're going to have a very hard time. And I think that's kind of the same thing here, is that the more you throw in the air, it's like, well, I have to catch this and keep the other ones going at the same time. And it's
right.
Yeah. But there's a whole bunch in here where they actually break down a little more, like, why this isn't the best idea and everything. So, I definitely recommend reading this article if you, get a chance. It'll be in the show notes.
Absolutely. So with that, I don't know. What do you guys think?
We've got more.
We got more?
Yeah.
My article didn't go far enough down?
No. After multitasking is internet overuse, which is probably the major one of this article.
That was the one.
Sorry, guys.
It's all right.
My article didn't scroll far enough. I thought it was the end of the article.
No, there's a graphic on here also that says Americans spend...
The graphic is great.
Yeah, it's a breakdown of... it says Americans spend 11 hours a day with electronic media. And if you think about how many hours you're awake, what's the average person awake? Let's say, 16 hours if that gives you 8 hours of sleep? That's a lot of your day, you know? And I honestly, it's like, I feel like it's more than that, but anyway, it's amazing when you look at because some of these I actually think are probably low, but it's still impressive. Like it says, like multimedia device, it has like 2 minutes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, DVD, Blu-ray player, it says 9 minutes. That one I can see because a lot of people are streaming. They aren't necessarily using DVD players anymore. Game consoles, 12 minutes. Time-shifted TV, which I'm assuming that's DVR stuff, right? 32 minutes. Internet on a PC, an hour and 1 minute. Smartphones, an hour and 7 minutes. That's gotta be low. For a lot of people.
Really low.
That's really low. 2 hours and 46 minutes, and it says radio. That I feel like is probably high. But because most people really aren't listening to the radio a lot anymore. They're listening to podcasts, or I guess that if you're counting like Spotify as part of that, that's probably closer to accurate.
I think if you include driving, commute to work and back, plus at work, in like radio, and I think that's solid. Yeah,
that's probably true. I hadn't thought about that.
Because people do listen to radio, especially with kids and things like that. They'll have music on or whatever.
True. Mm-hmm. And then live TV, it says 5 hours and 4 minutes. It's so. That's still, no matter how you look at that, even if those numbers are 100% accurate.
Yeah, it's still.
I mean, this is from 2013, and that's why I feel like some of this has definitely changed, because that's 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how just even with those old numbers, that's a lot of time,
Yeah.
And, a lot of the stuff we do, like how many times are you, like, it's amazing because a lot of times people will have a TV on and be on their phone, to where if you said, hey, what did you watch on TV? Like Henna was saying with the multitasking thing, they'll be like, I just had it on for noise. And it's like, well, what do you need the noise for? Like really, it's interesting how, but it's that extra noise, it's extra LED lights, which stimulate your brain, which can make sleeping more difficult, all that kind of stuff. But man, it's like, I know some people that, like, I'm one that, when I take a shower, the only noise really that you'll hear is, I have the fan on in the bathroom, to pull the steam out of there, basically. But I don't put music on very often or anything like that, because I use like my shower time as like quiet solitude,
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people that, use, like they'll set their phone up and have, Spotify or whatever playing while they're in the shower and stuff too. And I think there's like moments through your day you probably should look for time to, unplug essentially from whatever. And it's, I mean, hell, people used to read magazines or books if they went into the bathroom. Now it's you take your phone with you, and it just continues. A lot of people fall asleep with the TV on, which is terrible for you. But I understand some people, they need a noise or whatever. It's pretty crazy. So anyway, this says internet overuse. And it says, the internet's obviously a fantastic tool, but it's easy to get sucked in and spend way too much time on it, especially on social media. And it, obviously I think we've talked about this before, there's several studies showing that Facebook is stressful and contributes to anxiety, worry, insomnia, and a whole bunch of other things, because, a lot of people compare their lives, or it feeds FOMO. And if you don't know what FOMO is, it's fear of missing out, and we did a whole episode on it if you go check that out. And it's true, because like in the insomnia part, I don't think a lot of people realize how much they will keep checking their phone. When they're tired and probably could go to sleep, they'll just keep checking their phone because it's addicting. You want that instant feedback, or you don't want to miss a conversation, or you don't want to, and people will just keep grabbing at their phone.
Think of the times where you got a great chat or a message exchange back and forth with that girl that you're kind of interested in, and You're waiting for the response.
Yep. That's a great example. Yep.
Exactly.
Someone will be like, I don't do that. I'm like, yeah, right. You don't.
Right. We've all done it. Yeah.
We've all done that. Yeah. And your brain gets fired up.
Yeah.
It gets, you have stuff. I have been almost dead asleep. I am so tired, and something pops up on the phone.
Yep.
And all of a sudden and this article talks about cortisol, which is the fight or flight, mechanism. It's there for a reason. It's released into our brain. It tells us it's like we need full power. We need, Scotty in engineering's got to provide the full power.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. This goes back to evolution. Our bodies react. We are still 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
So even though it's no longer a bear, if it's some story that you read on your, or somebody calls you out in a freaking chat room or whatever it is that happens, or in my case, you're playing video games or whatever it is, our brains do not know the difference between that and what it was intended for, which is run away really fast.
Yep.
And it kicks in. And there is nothing we can do about it. And the next thing you know, Henno's awake at 4 in the morning.
Yep. You're totally right. Totally right. That is exactly
what and there are physical, if you've got that level of cortisol, because this has to do with stress and it has to do with anxiety and it has to do with all that. If you're releasing and a lot of this I learned from a former podcast. When you are doing this, if you're in a stressful environment every day, you are releasing cortisol. If you are putting yourself in any sort of a stressful environment, it doesn't matter what it is, if you are in a state of anxiety, if you are not getting enough sleep, if you are not eating enough, your body releases cortisol. Cortisol has been linked to so much illness, shortness of our lifespan, all of these things. And this is, it's very subtle. This is a very subtle thing with our electronics because we don't end up running away from the bear with our heart pounding, out of our throat and hyperventilating and blah, blah, blah. But something in our brain is doing the same thing.
Yeah. And we just
don't know it.
And we just keep feeding it. We just keep feeding it.
Because we're addicted.
Yeah. Now this points out internet addiction can reveal itself in different forms as an addiction to video games, porn, shopping, or gambling, as well as social media, of course. If you are unsure whether your internet use has become problematic, you can find free validated internet addiction quizzes developed by internet addiction pioneer Dr. Kimberly Young at netaddiction.com. That'd be interesting. Maybe I'll take one of those and see what...
I didn't need to take it. I stopped playing video games on Saturday by myself.
Yeah.
I knew.
You just recognized your addiction. It doesn't mean you're not addicted. No. Yeah, it's... and then it also says there are apps that can help. There's an app called Freedom. It says it's a highly rated app that lets you block distracting websites or the whole internet while you work on other tasks. And, stuff like this is really interesting because so many people, almost everybody works at a place that probably says you're not allowed to be on your phone while you're working. Because, that's literally stealing time from your employer. But so many people are on their phones while they're at work, and, not to mention, I listened to a Q&A with, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was talking about his sleeping habits and how he gets sleep 6 hours every night consistently. He said that's all he's needed for years and years. But, an hour or so before bed, like we talked in the episode where we talked about sleep, like an hour before bed or 2 hours, he puts his iPhone, iPad, all that stuff, he does not keep it in his bedroom. What he does is he sits and he reads from an actual book, not from an e-reader or anything, from an actual book, and then he goes to sleep, and it's because he's setting up that when I go into my bedroom, the bed you go to sleep. Like, it's not a place where I, sit and play video games or a place where I jump on Facebook or whatever. I go and I read and then I go to sleep. You're conditioning your brain for that behavior, versus confusing your brain with the other. Cause again, the more you stare at those tablets and everything, they wake you up. because your brain goes, oh, it's daylight, must be time to wake up. And, which leads to, trouble sleeping too. What's this? Oh, I was just reading this. There's actually a next section here that says for introverts only. Must be for people who, where's that real quick? I'm trying to just skim to see if there's...
It had more to do with your brain chemistry being different.
Okay, yeah, I see that now, yeah.
And I think as an overall message, you pointed out, Brian, that if you're already wired differently for certain things, it's going to affect you even worse.
Yeah, and to be aware of it. Yeah. Yeah, it says right here, knowing yourself and understanding you're an introvert is the first step in avoiding too much stimulation. Which makes sense. We've talked about this in a different context of, like when I talked about going to that concert, and it was too much, it was too much for me, like by the end of it, it was too much. And I've had that a few places where I pushed myself too far and I'm overstimulated at that point. So there's certain things that just really get at my anxiety more than others. And I've tried to either cut back on those or, like there's some restaurants, if you go to at certain times, they're crazy busy and all this. But if you go at another time that, you miss the dinner rush, you can usually, it's not stupid. So, you just make those decisions instead. Like I hate being in a car, so I don't like going anywhere. Like I didn't like going near the mall near Christmas because it's ridiculous, those kind of things. So yeah, that's a really good point. That's, for those who are, introverts. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of it.
I mean, it's a great article because it really touches on quite a few different points.
Yeah.
And stuff you don't think about on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You go about your life and you do things and you don't really consider the effect that they're having on your brain and how they can be, how basically you think you're making your life better, but you're actually making your life worse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's a great thing for people potentially to do. Just write down when you spend time with no noise, basically. Now, obviously, it's going to be hard to have complete quiet because there's always going to be, an air conditioner. Like Henno said, there's a leaf blower outside or something. But to where you're not generating, you're not sitting on your laptop or watching TV or on your phone, to where maybe you're just like, okay, I meditate for 10 minutes in the morning. Well, there's 10 minutes right there that are, essentially quiet time, because unless you're using your phone for guided meditation, then maybe not, but, look at that kind of stuff. And then, I think you'll realize there's a lot of times where you're like, geez, I spend almost all day with some device on around me, And if you live by yourself, I can see it too, because, during the time when I lived by myself, I'd have the TV on because, I'm alone, and it's you kind of...
Sometimes it gets too quiet.
Well, yeah, because really, I mean, after a while, it's kind of like you kind of go a little, not crazy, but, you start, you start like wanting for conversation or something. But I think, a lot of people could really do that. Like, if you broke down how much time a day you're doing all that stuff, I wonder how people's breakdowns would look,
right.
on a day. Cause I'll bet mine's higher than 11. Because almost any time I'm awake, I've got something. My phone or my laptop or the TV's on or video games or, whatever. And a lot of it with me is for distraction, because if I don't, like I said before, my brain starts going negative a lot of times when it's left to its, when it's not distracted.
Mm-hmm.
So really the only quiet time I have is when I'm reading, but I read on my iPad. So, I'm still stimulating my brain with that. So,
And that may not be the best for your sleeping, mister.
Oh, it's not, I'm sure, but, it's easiest.
Right.
I just, hey, look, I can get a new book.
But that's so true. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's so easy to use our devices and stuff that we get away from what's best for ourselves.
Yep.
Just because it's most convenient and easy.
Really, if you want to look at any sort of downfall of people, that's generally what it is right there. When you start looking for easy instead of quality, essentially, no matter what it is, like, oh, an easy fix is to, drink myself until I'm not depressed versus going to therapy and doing the work, or, oh, I'm going to eat McDonald's instead of making my own food, or, like it's just about anything, I'm going to take a pill to try to lose weight instead of actually going and working out, or, those kind of things. It's, yeah. So, yeah.
But yeah, definitely, folks, keep an eye on how much quiet time that you have, and maybe that's what the goal for this week is, to find out how much quiet time you have on Monday, and see if you can expand on that. So from Friday, you have a little bit more quiet time.
I'll tell you,
on Monday,
a great time to implement it. It'd be, unless you're with other people, as far as like you're going to talk, would be when you're eating. Because as Henno's pointed out on this podcast and on Angela's Awesome podcast, they talked about on there as well. It's like that allows you to focus on your eating and enjoy your food more, because you're focusing on the food rather than just stuffing things in your face while you're scrolling whatever on your phone,
Yeah. Turn the TV off, put the phone down, don't even pick up a newspaper or magazine, sit and eat.
Yep. It's also better for you as far as overeating goes, because you'll listen to your body a little better.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Another great place is in the car, folks.
Yeah.
Is in the car. Try just driving to work without radio on or without a podcast playing or
Except
anything
ours.
like that.
Ours is okay. All other podcasts
Ours is always okay.
turn right off.
Ours, but try just being kind of quiet with your thoughts and, paying attention to the road.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to just, for a day, pay attention to the noises around you that you don't pay attention to,
Yeah.
Like, wherever you are, just focus and go, okay, how much noise do I have around in my environment every day?
Can I eliminate some of it?
Can I get rid of some of it? And if there's a place where you suddenly find that it's very quiet, well, hang out there a little more often.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're in a situation like me, it's like if you start going into negative thoughts or whatever, that's a great time to work on other tools that work the opposite way. Like when you start thinking negative, try to get your brain into, the rationalization of those thoughts. And, it's a good time for to reflect on things, So, yeah, that's all good stuff. And something we definitely need. I've noticed there seems to be a lot of people, I think people are in a lot of ways kind of hitting that fill line. Like you see it all the time online where people are like, I need some time off of Twitter or whatever, and you'll just see them kind of disappear from social media for, a month or a few weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. Just unplug for a little while. Or, there's
a little reset.
One guy I saw, he went on vacation. He's like, hey guys, I'm going to completely delete Twitter, Facebook, all this stuff off my phone while I'm on vacation, so I focus on my vacation. Because he was going on vacation with his kids. And I'm like, that is absolutely what you should be doing. That's great, And that's why I said I try to do that when I'm with people too, like when when I've been on vacation or whatever, it's like I try not to just sit on my phone the whole time. It's like, or, when I go to a concert or where I'm not like constantly checking Twitter, it's in my phone's in my pocket most of the time. And I'm just there, it's a great time to, exercise living in the moment,
Yep.
Absolutely.
And you know
That's
what?
a great suggestion.
You can take pictures and share them later. You don't have to share them all at one time. You can just share them later. Like when you get back, you can be like, hey, here's pictures from my vacation. And people will still go, oh, cool. And they'll still click the like buttons and give you all that ego feed that you need.
And we no longer have to wait, an hour or days for our photographs to come back.
Right.
Like we used to. But we can still wait an hour or two till we get home and then upload them.
Exactly. That's, exactly. Just all that kind of little stuff like that. I think it's just good practice, I think, for all of us to do, because it's just, it's just better, just keep our fill lines closer to or not empty, but not as full as, cause the closer to full you get, the more anxiety and stress you get. So, you don't want to feel pressure to have to post things for online people, it's like, whatever. So, before we, well, I don't know, do you guys have anything else before I move on
Nope.
here? Okay.
No, I'm good.
All right, before we go into the wrap-up stuffs, I wanted to bring up a couple of sites that I heard about this week from listening to, like, Mental Illness Happy Hour and some other podcasts. First of all, Mental Illness Happy Hour, if you want to learn about, and it's misophonia, not misphonia, as I kept saying, misophonia, which is the rage at certain sounds that I talk about. If you want to hear the Mental Illness Happy Hour episode with that, I'll have the link in the show notes. Or if you want to look it up yourself, it's episode 317. And like I said, I'd like to talk about that a little more going forward. There's a couple things I want to, like, research on it a little bit first. But one of the sites was makeitokay.org. And they point out I haven't listened to this podcast yet, but I've heard a good amount of people recommending it, called The Hilarious World of Depression, which, another mental illness podcast that they talk about at the top of their page. But I've heard other podcasts mention it, that it's an entertaining and, good look at kind of the same thing, just mental illness and people's, situations with it. But this website is about, getting conversations, over mental illness going. Like, I love, they have, like, an example right on their front page where it looks like a text conversation, and there's a woman on one side and a guy on the other side, and it says, totally having an ADD moment. The guy goes, do you really have ADD? She says, yeah, I was diagnosed as a kid. And then underneath it, it shows, like, the typing thing. But then underneath it, it says, what can you say? Complete the conversation. And one is, I have problems paying attention to, or I didn't know. How bad is it? I'll give everybody a quick hint on that. It's not that I have problems paying attention to. Because that to an ADD person is like saying to a depressed person, I get sad also. Which it comes from a good place. You're trying to identify, try to say, I get it, but there's the difference. Anyway, this website's about, the stigma, against mental illness, how you can, take action, and basically teaching more appropriate ways to talk to people with mental illness. And I was looking through it a little bit earlier today. It looks like a pretty great site. So, if people get a chance, that might be a good site to go have a quick click through, especially if you don't suffer from a mental illness. It may help you understand a little more, what to do. And the other site, that I noticed was from an episode of Mental Illness Happy Hour where he talked to somebody about codependency. And the website is coda.org, CODA.org. And it basically, you can take a test to kind of see if you're a codependent. And it doesn't have to be, even though a lot of times people in these programs are, what do you call it? It's for, like, addiction, but, like, it doesn't have to be, because there's many different types of codependency. So, same thing. I thought there's just a good informational site. And there's a lot of people that don't realize that they're codependent that are.
Yeah.
And again, we'll probably have an episode on codependency at some point. I'm sure Henno can sink his teeth into that one.
I've been to meetings.
Yeah.
So if you do have any questions about codependency, please reach out to me.
Yeah.
I can probably answer some questions.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, I listening to that the episode of that podcast, there were some things that popped up in there that I was like, I never considered myself in that group. So, it's interesting.
If you have relationships,
yeah,
right,
you're probably codependent.
Mm-hmm.
And that means your work, your relationship between you and your employer, you and your friends, you and your spouses. Trust me, we all have a little in us.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely. And it's, what I really gleaned from the episode was, and I think I had never really looked much into codependency. I have that book that you mentioned that I can never remember the title of, Henno. It's
Codependent No More.
There you go. I have that on my list of things to read, and I still haven't got to it yet. But there's, it's one of those things I want to read into, because every time I hear it brought up on a podcast, I'm always like, wow, I bet this affects a lot of people who don't realize how it affects, like you were just saying with the relationships thing, it's like, there's little pieces of it, even if you're not full, like, whoa, this is a major issue, but there's always little things that I think people can learn from this.
Yes.
Including myself. I've tried to read a little on things. That's again why I like that mental illness happy hour is you never know what topic is going to come up, whether it's like I said, a trauma, like a PTSD situation or, abuse or codependency or depression or, you just kind of never know where it's going to go. I've learned a lot, even though each one is that person's journey. There's been a lot of times where I'm like, and then I'll look into what they talked about to learn more about it, and, so that I can understand it a little better in the event that someone comes to me with, hey, I have this issue,
Exactly.
So, all right, that's what I got.
Cool. All right, guys, we ready?
Yep.
All right. So, folks, if you would like to carry on the conversation with us, you can reach me on Twitter at Jen's Crazy Life. That's Jen with a G. You can also shoot us an email at the Crazy Life Podcast at Outlook.com or visit our website at thecrazylifepodcast.weebly.com. And you, Hanno?
You can find me on Twitter at Ida Hanno. You can also find me on Facebook Messenger. Just look up Hanno Heiter in Idaho. That's me. And take a look at your life. Are you playing too many video games?
And how about you, Brian?
You can also find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/group/Crazy Life Podcast. As well as in the show notes, I'm going to add these two websites to the list of resources on our page, which is under, I can never remember if it's under like notes or files. It's something like that. But come join us over at our Facebook group, and you can have a look at some of that as well as resources about like the suicide prevention hotline number and other places that you can reach out to. You can find us also on Twitter at the Crazy Life Pod, where I post when new episodes go up. You can find me on Twitter at Stunami. You can find my other podcast at salty_language or at saltylanguage.com. And that show is Not Safe for Work. Let's see. Where did I lost my place. Oh, we're part of the Tangent Bound Network, which can be found at tangentboundnetwork.com. And if you'd like to help the show out, there's a couple ways that you could help us. One is if you use iTunes, please leave us a review, rate us, subscribe if you haven't already. And then if you use Stitcher or another podcast app, please use the like or share button because those things help us raise our rating basically so that we'll get noticed easier in searches. Also, if you could retweet our, when the new show goes up, to kind of just help spread our reach a little bit, we would greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Now the next part, we're not doctors, therapists, trained professionals of any kind. Please don't see this show as a replacement for professional help or therapy. And please don't self-diagnose. There's nothing wrong with looking things up a little bit to understand your situation. Or if we say something and you're like, wow, that's me. Go talk to a professional about it. As I say all the time, I've said quite a few times, go get the estimate. Just go to a psychiatrist or, your primary caregiver and, get a course of action, and then you can decide from there. Forgot something. What am I forgetting from that section? I'm just totally blank. I've got a horrible migraine and I'm just blanking now.
It's okay.
Anyway.
We forget this time.
Yeah.
We'll catch it next time.
Right. If you feel, as though you may harm yourself or others, please notify, a friend so that you're not alone, or a family or someone in your support system, or contact your therapist or doctor, or if you have to, call 911, tell them you're having a mental health crisis, or go to a hospital. Or again, we've got resources over on our Facebook page, or just Google, suicide prevention hotline or crisis line, something to that effect. And, but please reach out for help. And again, it doesn't have to be the point to where you're actually going to do something. If you catch yourself writing suicide notes or writing a note or planning how you would do something, that's the time to reach out, because, you can catch it before it becomes something tragic. So, definitely, contact somebody, but please don't act on it as far as, hurting yourself or others. And, then the last thing is, as I've been liking to point out, get a hold of somebody that you haven't talked to in a while, or even if it is someone you talk to all the time, just reach out to them, see how they're doing, tell them you love them, you appreciate them, whatever, cause, I keep getting these lessons, and we all do too, these lessons about how so many people, wait until it's too late to say something to somebody. So, don't be one of those people. Tell people you appreciate them now. Don't wait. Not to mention, you never know. You can make their day. You could save their life, because maybe they think no one cares. So, you just never know what a little act of kindness like that might mean the world to somebody. Done.
Yes, exactly. So, with that, folks, I think we're at the end. And remember, keep breathing, wiggle your toes, and have a good week.